Welcome to the Friday vlog.
Welcome to the Friday vlog.
And today we wanted to talk about anger. And I realized that for me, this is almost as hard as talking about sex.
Is it really?
I have a lot of conditioning around anger and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And Angus and I did an interview with Hannah Studley yesterday, and she said that one of the pieces of information that has come up in research regarding pain is that often, and obviously this is a generalization, but often those who struggle with chronic pain tend not to express their anger outwardly, but to turn it inwardly. And I've heard that also talked about in relationship to depression. And I realized that that is a lot of what my conditioning that I've taken on about anger is, that I'm not allowed to be angry, anger's bad. It's something that's embarrassing if I show it. And so I just, as I'm, stripping away these layers of conditioning, I realize that there's a lot there around anger for me. And I know that it's come up for us in our relationship, where you had a tendency more to wear your heart on your sleeve and to get angry but get over it, whereas I would really judge that in the past as not okay and take it very personally and judge you as wrong for doing that. And I realize now that a lot of that is just the rules that I made up for myself, and it's not necessarily truth, just cultural conditioning.
Yeah, but it is a case of separate realities, because I have my own programming and conditioning, which is equally as loaded, if not more so, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that part of the way that I was framing anger was that it was a fundamental character flaw. Anger is something that's completely unacceptable. And I think that I had created that narrative probably growing up with my father, who had a real issue with his temperament. And so that when I took that conditioning and programming out into the big wide world, there was just zero tolerance for anger. And that's not to say, in your reality, I would lose my temper. But for all those times that I lost my temper, I felt tremendous guilt and shame about doing that. So, and it was because I felt like, here I am repeating the sins of the father. So it was a case of me just having a really warped idea around what is acceptable around anger. In my experience, and looking back now, I feel like I kind of had it wired in a way which was not healthy for me, about how anger is unacceptable. It's just it's a part of the human experience, but I felt like there's just no room for anger, and yet here I am getting angry. Yeah. But the consequence of my anger and me getting angry was that I'd feel really guilty about it. I'd feel really ashamed.
And then I think that fit into our dynamic, because I would basically shame you.
Exactly. Made it 10 times worse.
Because I would basically...
It was like pouring gasoline on the fire.
Yeah, and that was my conditioning. That it isn't okay, and that's not allowed, and then to...
It's amazing that we just didn't fall apart the same.
Well, I think we nearly did a lot of times. Yeah. But then to add on sort of conditioning around what's enlightened, not that I'm enlightened, but what's a spiritual way to live life? What does spiritual teaching show us? And then all of that I took to mean like, well, yeah, clearly anger is not part of that. That's all about peace and love and understanding, and anger, there's no room for anger there. And so again, putting it all to the side, which is really a very normal, healthy part of the human experience. And so I'm not saying that I want to just like go crazy, although I probably should go crazy in a room by myself or something, just to get familiar with my anger and get comfortable with it. So I'm not advocating that I want to just, start behaving in ways that are hurtful to other people, but I'm really seeing the health of being open to all of the human experience without judgment, And anger is just a normal, healthy part of the human experience that comes up in response to feedback that lets us know our boundaries are being violated, something's not okay. What we do with that then is going to be determined by our conditioning. And what I see is that I've used that conditioning to make myself wrong for feeling the anger, which could be actually a healthy feedback for me to then guide action even.
Yeah, and I think through the warped lens through which I've been looking at my own anger is that any demonstrations of anger, whether it's as far as I'm concerned or somebody else, I tend to spend so much time ruminating on why they got angry, why I got angry, and the shame that was associated with that. Instead, it's just a fleeting emotion that really I can have and I can kind of let go. And I think that's a healthy use of anger. And I think of some of my teachers who have really demonstrated to me how it is okay to kind of be upset with certain, there may be something that I've done that I need some feedback for, which is probably irritating for them in terms of I've kind of let them down, let's say. And I've seen expressions of anger around that, not in a sort of, in a sort of tempestuous way, but in a healthy way where they've obviously irritated, but they've given me feedback. And then 10 minutes later, they've moved on. In the past, I would have kind of created my own narrative about, oh, it's unacceptable for them to lose their temper. Why couldn't they have given me that feedback without losing their temper? And yet, that's just a part of the human experience. It's normal. And the opportunity for me is take the feedback, not take any of it personally, and move on. I'm not obviously, advocating that someone is vomiting all over me per se, but I think anger is warranted at times.
Well, I think that's the part where this gets really messy, and it can be like, what, are you advocating for violence? Are you advocating for behavior that's hurtful to others? And it's like, well, no, I don't think I'm advocating for that, but maybe some situations violence is appropriate. Like, I don't know. Like, we can only listen to that wisdom inside of us and listen to what that guidance is with as clear a mind as possible. And what I'm seeing in this kind of messy exploration that I'm in is just how unclear I am when it comes to having neutrality around anger, and what that means to have room for it, what that means to have room for it in our relationship. I've certainly learned to become less fragile in the face of upset, whether it be you're upset, whether it's the kids upset. I've become more open to being present to someone else's human experience. And that, I think, can also go a long way to being open to my human experience. And I know I kind of said it as a joke, but I think it is part of the progress within me when I said, well, how come you can get angry but I can't? It was sort of like me being open to like, hey, it's okay for me to be angry.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. We're not going to fall apart. Let's have room for all of it.
Right. Yeah, no, it's fascinating in terms of what we both brought to the table in our relationship. Well, we had our corresponding programming that kind of complemented each other in a way that was challenging, but ultimately is provided us with growth and learning. But I think that for me, I would get angry. It's interesting for you to talk about this now, that I would get angry and I would feel tremendous shame. But your way of showing up with anger for me was very measured and controlled, and you were somehow able to sort of be somewhat cogent in that experience, where I would be kind of like falling apart, probably couldn't string a sentence together. And then your anger would come back at me in the shape and form of criticism.
A very logical, critical
argument that I would feel even more shame, and seemingly unable to defend myself, but still wanting very much to do so. And then I would, probably explode in that kind of pressure. But it is a case of us being able to see, that anger is just really fundamentally a part of the normal human experience. But I had fully demonized it, and there's a way to sort of reframe it in a way where I can get comfortable with it. And I think that was demonstrated to me by some of the people that I look up to, who I've learnt this understanding from, who've been able to show me, yeah, people get angry, but they move on. They don't hold a grudge. I always assumed the grudge was held, and that needed to be negotiated through. And I've been pleasantly relieved to see that that's not the case.
So we want to be clear, we're not giving any prescription about what to do with anger or how to express anger. This is just really an exploration of how I'm seeing even more clearly the level of conditioning that I've lived with around anger. And I think this is probably accurate that women get more programming about not being allowed to be angry or being criticized for being angry, or not even being that angry and being told they're angry.
It's supposed to be sweet and kind.
Yeah, there's a lot of cultural,
motherly,
a lot of cultural programming around that. And I'm not saying that men don't have that, and we all deal with our the way we interpret things. But to me, it's like there's an opportunity for all of us to really see the health in all of the human experience, and that in being open to it, there's more connection with our true nature, not from just a peace and love place that's inauthentic, but from a raw, real, powerful, empowered place.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to reflect on this, because I can remember one experience I had where I spent a day with a couple who I kind of knew fairly well, but I hadn't really spent a day with them together. And they seemed like they were fighting the whole time, really going at it at times. But they just loved and adored one another. And they'd been married for a good 25 years. But I can see now there was just my discomfort and my judgment around anger. They would maybe shout and get over it really quickly. They would get over it within a heartbeat. And yet, in my experience, it's I don't know how you get over that. We'd probably spend a couple of months trying to negotiate one of those little arguments that they would have. But they were it was all said and done,
Yeah.
just, they would say it how it was and move on. Mm-hmm. Just weren't taking it personally at all.
Yeah.
Just proves to me just that it was my discomfort more than anything
Yeah.
else, my programming, my conditioning.
Yeah. And that you can actually see their resilience in just being with what's present.
Yeah, I mean, they adored each other, really. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
And they were very vocal about that.
Yeah. So who knows what we're inviting into our relationship?
Oh, I see.
What?
I don't know what kind of feedback we were going to get from our audience.
Oh,
as
who
it
knows?
were.
Yeah, who knows what kind of feedback we're going to get, but who knows what we're going to be opening up
Yeah,
to.
because this is just us thinking out loud, really.
Yeah, this is a growing edge, and it's just something that felt relevant. Like I said, people think sex is hard to talk about. You don't hear people talking about anger that much.
They don't really, no, because they have all their programming and conditioning.
That's right. Especially in a spiritual conversation.
Yeah,
That anger is kind of that's not spiritual.
Exactly,
But
yeah.
Everything is, right? It's all part of the human experience.
Yeah. I think of, I don't know, my biblical history is not very good from my years going to church with my mum, but I know that Jesus went into the temple and upset the tables. I don't think he was probably in a particularly settled state of mind when he did that.
That's right.
Yeah.
But
it is.
Made sense at the time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So we're just inviting you to be open to all of your human experience and seeing the health in it and letting go of any judgments on any emotion. Maybe anger is no big deal to you. It's a big deal to us. Or it has been in the past a big deal to us. Maybe it's another emotion that kind of you have judgment on and have difficulty with. And what we're just encouraging you to do is to stay open to the full range of human experience, understand the health in it, understand the health in being open to it, and allowing that energy to move through. And then from that connected place, seeing what makes sense from there.
Yeah, that's lovely. And just to be completely transparent, I think I dodged a bullet filming this vlog today.
Why?
Because my phone buzzed, and I know how much you hate that. I don't know if you heard it, but it's you showed remarkable restraint.
I didn't even hear it. Have a great weekend, everyone.
That would be acceptable demonstration of anger as far as I'm concerned.
It would be.
Yes.
Okay. I didn't hear it. We'll have to do it another time. We'll have to actually ring the next time.
That's true.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.